This episode of Between Turns is brought to you by the other 12 minutes of Jeff's lost monologue on the White Stripes. You could be sitting on it right now.
All right, John. Guess what? People we don't know are actually listening to the show.
Okay.
So now you have to tell them to go to our Board Game Geek Guild page and get a micro badge. Turn your head slowly. Slowly right now. Pretend we're doing this on YouTube. And slowly turn your head to the fourth wall.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can get your micro badge at the Board Game Geek Guild's page for Between Turns. Come and join the guild, and I can't even do this anymore.
Wow. That's the worst thing I've literally ever heard. Yeah, so that's just not going to fly. But, so anyway, board game, Pacific Northwest game swap happened. Did you get anything cool, John? What you been playing? Don't answer that. I don't want to know what you've been playing. But seriously, we should talk about the swap, though. It was a cool thing, and I have stuff to talk about.
About the swap? Or just
I
other
do.
stuff?
No, about the swap.
We swapped some games?
John's segue fails. But
I'm not good at the segue. You already said it. I'm good at monologuing. I'm not good at segues.
I know. But anyway, I have peeked my head down a rabbit hole, and I'm not sure what to do with it. Because I managed to come home from the swap with a copy of Age of Steam.
Okay.
Second edition.
That was Math Trade, right? Did you got that in?
Yep. I did the Math Trade.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, that's a pretty good Math Trade get.
That was a hugely good Math Trade get. The problem is I kind of feel like one of those impoverished families that win a mansion on a reality TV show. And they're like, we know your life is terrible, but at least here's a mansion. And the people are like, yay, this is amazing. And then, like, the first time anything breaks, they realize they can't fix it, you know? And, you know, the second the tax bill arrives, they have to, like, start renting out half the house to a crime lord. And,
oh, no.
And as I've only skimmed the surface of Age of Steam. I've only slightly, like, I only know a little bit about what it's about, even though I'm a huge Martin Wallace fan. Total fanboy. He can poop in a box, and I will probably give it the benefit of the doubt. No matter how many terrible games he releases, I will try it because he's just my dude. So anyway, Age of Steam has been on the want list for quite a long time, and all the people in the know say don't buy third edition. I mean, buy it if you want to play Age of Steam because Age of Steam is awesome, but try to get first and second edition. Well, I didn't really research it that heavily because I wasn't super motivated to get it. It was just one of those things that if I ever stumble across one, I will. That day arrived at the swap. I got a hold of a copy. Super nice looking second edition. It's pristine. Once I had that, I kind of did a little bit of research, and it turns out there's only 3,000 copies of this thing in existence. So that whole bit of, you know, oh, well, if you're going to buy it, just buy this one. It is literally like someone saying, well, if you're gonna, seriously, like if you're gonna go out here on the Sound, you need a yacht because there's no way to experience what's out here without a yacht, right? Mm-hmm. So I find myself in this position where I just found a yacht, John. I just got a yacht, and now I'm ready to take this thing cruising. So I start looking into it. And one of the reasons, I mean, besides the fact that Age of Steam is just a great game in and of itself, part of the reason it's so legendary is because there are like 150 expansions for it. Mm-hmm. And every one of them is a map, and there's nothing else to them. There's not a bunch of parts, and there's not big rule books that go with them. It's just literally a new map, but it kind of became a thing among the designers to see how far they could stretch the basic mechanics of Age of Steam. So as these things have come out over the years, it's almost like you're getting 300 different games in the box if you start collecting these maps. And this is where kind of my I don't know, yacht allegory comes in, because I start looking at these maps because I realize all this stuff and I'm like, let's do this. Like I am hyped about it. I'm ready to, like, every Thursday night we're just playing Age of Steam for the rest of forever. This is the Between Turns Age of Steam podcast. We're not going to talk about any other games anymore. I'm just ready to go. So I start looking up these maps to see what's available, and the maps are worse than second edition Age of Steam. These are maps where they print 80 of them. So I read these things that, get Disco Inferno, it's the best map ever. And then I look, and there's like 2,000 of them in existence. Mm-hmm. I look, the only price I can find is $150, $180 for a piece of cardboard. Mounted, but still. And the classic maps that everybody adores that come from Winsome, as I said, they printed 80 of them, like 80, and that was 14 years ago. How many of those things haven't caught on fire or been left out in a porch and been turned into a rat nest or something?
Well, let's be realistic. The situation you're describing, this is the kind of thing that someone gets buried with.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You have this exclusive thing. I mean, honestly, there has to be some sort of secret club.
Yeah, a secret yacht club.
And if you if you look at all train games ever made, from Ticket to Ride to 18XX whatever, all of them have clues to tell you about the secret locations of one of each of these 80 different maps.
Yeah.
It's like the really boring board game version of National Treasure.
Yeah, or it's the Lost Jack White album that he worked in a. He used to reupholster couches, and he used to take his demos and stick them inside of couches as he was reupholstering them.
Did he really do that? Was that a thing?
Yeah, this is a true story.
Wait, so hang on. So you would take your couch into this very kind of tall, pale upholsterer, mm-hmm. and then it would come back to you, and it would have this like rectilinear lump in it.
They're, from all accounts, and this may be Jack White story building. I don't know, character building. This all may be fiction, but the tale is that the first album he cut, he printed 500 copies of it, and he stuck them one into each couch he worked on for all the times that he was working in this couch reupholstery thing. So supposedly, and this was long before they broke, the White Stripes broke. It was literally some little punk playing a trick, basically. But he did it, supposedly. And none of these albums have ever been recovered. Again, to be fair, like, we live in kind of a different world right now. At the time Jack White was doing that, it's just probably, it's all little old ladies that were probably refurbishing the chair that they got from their grandmother that was passed down to their mother, and then it was passed down to them. So all of these lost Jack White albums are in these houses of these 104-year-old women, and no one knows anything about it. And they've probably all blown to the and plus it's Detroit, so a lot of them probably just had rats crawl in them and die, and then they just threw them in the they just threw them into the
hello
into the
Detroit.
Yeah, so what? I'm from Cleveland, man.
I know.
At least we're not Detroit. So, now we got like 14 minutes of talking about the White Stripes.
I was about to say that was a 6-minute story that didn't really go anywhere.
Well, it did go anywhere because you asked me what it was about.
Oh no!
So to get back on course here, these maps they're impossible to get a hold of unless I'm just going to start walking around dropping $100 bills, and even then, it's likely there's just actually none for sale. I'm essentially trying to get, I was going to say a copy of the Mona Lisa, but there's like 38 of those around. So, but still, I feel like I've bought a game that consists of 80 different works of art by world famous painters. And now that I have this thing, if I want to use it, I need to collect those things. It is terrifying to even think about what that's going to be like. And it's mind-blowing how rare these things are. And what's super mind-blowing to me is how well known they are, even though they're that rare. So I'm not surprised that it's hard to get a hold of. There's a lot of games in collections that are hard to get a hold of. A lot of the splotters, those were hard to get a hold of. But they were hard to get a hold of because, like you said, people that bought them loved them and just didn't part with them. But there were still 10, 20,000 copies of these things in the world, right? They weren't technically that rare. You knew where they were at. They just weren't being sold. They were being hoarded. But these Winsome maps, I mean, how can there only be 80? And yet, every podcast I listen to, they've all played them. My only hope is that someone has a little document repurposing center, and there's some kind of...
And when they're not making IDs, they're making...
Yeah, they're making Age of Steam maps. I feel like that's my only hope.
I don't know. I mean, this seems to me, first off, them being printed in such small numbers and having so many different ones, this seems like the kind of thing that a publisher or a designer would do to get people to their booth.
I don't think so. It was just kind of a punk rock scene, because...
So you're saying they were just releasing them in just in literally tiny numbers simply because it was just this.
That was all they could. That was all they could do. They were,
it was a cult hit, and the community was small. Therefore, that's kind of all that there was.
Yeah, because I mean, this is 2002, 2003, and 18XX was certainly around, but it wasn't something. In 2003, you could say 18XX and have more than 4 people know what you were talking about, right? Or that maybe that's just me, not being that surrounded by the usual kind of crusty old guys playing Avalon Hill games, because that's not where I'm from, right? That's not a thing that I was ever exposed to. So maybe in certain pockets those were popular, but I just feel in 2003, even, as I started really getting into board games, started using Board Game Geek a lot, 18XX was not a thing that I'd ever even heard of, much less been on my radar. And, Age of Steam, like where that comes from was, the 18XX games were niche and popular, and someone was trying to crack it so that could be played in an hour and a half, 2 hours, and have the same kind of decision space that's in an 18XX, but condensed down and made quick, and certainly, bring in some Euro elements into the mix, as a means of kind of compressing that experience. So, what was happening is that I think that, when that came out, maybe a lot of people didn't care, and this is all conjecture. Like, I don't have a background to talk about as a historian what happened. This is just what I'm kind of gathering from what I've done, because I now have a yacht and I have to figure out how to pay to keep the yacht and fuel the yacht and hire a captain to live in the yacht so that I can go where I want to because I got a yacht. But what was happening back then is these people were just hobbyists, and they found this cool thing, and it was no demand for it in public, so they would just kind of punk rock, work these things out, and then call each other up, because it was only like 4 or 5 people making these maps that even knew what they were, and they were all kind of interlinked as far as who was making what. It was probably just handshake deals. Hey, you care if I make a map? No, cool, looks awesome. And they would just print a few. I think Bezier Games, that's how he started, I think, was making Age of Steam maps. I don't know what level he printed at, but a lot of those early maps were coming out of those guys. On top of that, there's a weird, again, the part of this that's a luxury thing is, Winsome. So the Winsome model seems bonkers. Like I get it. I understand it. A little bit of what I'm about to say is theater, so save the emails. But
no, I disagree.
You know,
I disagree because I know that this whole rant of yours has started just a flurry of ad hoc fact checking, and I don't say save them. Send those emails. Send them all to Jeff, please.
Oh, absolutely. Give me a little bit of school, but it's part of this luxury because a lot of these things, it's kind of similar to what gets tossed around at Splotter, right? To where it's almost like a cult. People that get Splotter will gladly and blindly send them $150 for something basically on a promise. Then you look at the Splotters, and they're everything everyone complains about, right? The art is terrible. The covers are bland.
Oh no.
Again, much akin to the 18XX in general. The maps are just a lot of times blank square tiles with nothing on them but like a dot. And it's people that are playing Blood Rage look at that and go, look what I get in Blood Rage for $150. Why on earth would you pay that for that box of Food Chain Magnate? I've been kind of a staunch defender of Splotter, but it's kind of like it's a cool punk rock band and they do what they do, and if you like them you buy it, and if you don't, who cares? Don't buy it. But now as I'm kind of again inherited this yacht, I'm looking at what I need to set sail, and I'm seeing these terrible bland plane maps that are printed on paper that cost $148. And I'm just going, this is a level of crazy luxury item that I don't even know what I've stumbled into here. Like I'm in an alternate universe right now. And to get back to the Win Some Games things, the Win Some Game model is they basically have a secret darknet site that no one has the keys to. I guess it's I don't know if Fight Club is the right thing, but it's you have to go to the secret place. And again, I know 2 seconds of Google search and you can give me the exact address of where you go to get on this list. Again, this is theater, people. But they have like a Yahoo message board or something, kind of like Phil Eklund and his Living Rule books. It's like one of those. And the only way you can order or win some game is to put your name on this list. And
give them your social security number.
And they print whatever they decide they can print. And then they give it to a secret courier. And then in some kind of weird...
Is Banksy making the next map? Is that what's happening?
You know what? Banksy may very well be running Win Some Games, because it sounds like a Banksy move.
None of this is true. None of this is true.
But yeah, so then they print however many they're going to print of this game. And they don't do it to one game, John. They print like 3 or 4 games all at once. And they say, this game is $150. And there's 3 different ones. And the only way you buy one is if you buy all 3. And you're committed. So now if you want any one of those things, you're forking over $500 for 3 games. No. People are doing it. They are just throwing money at them like they're the Corleones or something.
This seems like any number of different parables that have been told where someone is sold a bill of goods at a high dollar that is meant to be exclusive and just wondrous and change their life. And then they get it home and they go, wait, what? However, they don't want to admit that they got taken. So they basically pass the scam on to someone else. So that way they're not the only person. That's what this seems like.
It's an elaborate, like, prestige pyramid scheme.
Well, and like none of the people that are doing the work of making this thing grow are getting anything out of it other than simply not being the only person swindled.
Yeah. It just seems bonkers.
This can't be real. Seriously, hang on. I'm going to have to look this
up.
No,
it's super real. And again, anyone listening will tell you and me how wrong we are. But I'm telling you, John, this is real. This is like UFO deniers. Like, it is... They are not going to admit Win Some Games runs this way, but it does. I'm telling you. I've seen it. I've seen the evidence.
Okay. So, I just punched this into Google, like so many other people are doing.
Right.
And the number one result that came up was How do people actually get Winsome games?
I'm telling you, the first thing I thought of, as I said a couple minutes ago, I'm expecting that I'm going to have to go out, rent a tux, and go to Don Corleone on the day of his daughter's wedding and ask him, may I please have a copy of the Heaven and Hell map, or, whatever the case may be. It seems bonkers, like Darknet, Secret Retreat.
This is crazy. So the response says that you basically have to sign up to an email list, and then you get notified, and you have about 24 hours to respond before it sells out typically. I guess you have to like meet under a bridge in Paris or something to pick it up. I don't know. It doesn't explain how you actually get them, but you're not kidding about this stuff. This is kind of phenomenal. But what's amazing though is as I'm looking at this and I'm seeing the list of people that have actually put out maps for these, there's names that I'm recognizing. For example, Clearclaw, from BGG,
right?
Has made a couple of these maps, and the thing I know him from, and this is where this is kind of getting interesting to me right now, is because he's done a couple legendary 18xx games that are they're standalone games that he put out there as print and plays. Because, and I mean, I'm not trying to derail, but one of the chief origin points for what ended up becoming the print and play community and dovetailed into the prototyping community, right, and the sort of citizen designer community, was 18xx players that wanted more 18xx. And so they started putting out these, stellar 18xx games as print and plays. And Clearclaw was one of those people. So he's done some of these maps, which is kind of phenomenal to see it championed by a pretty well-known 18xx.
Yeah, that's actually my secret hope, because I know Clearclaw.
Hello.
I know him. He doesn't know me. I met Clearclaw, but yeah, I was hoping I could be like I could go just beg and plead and get some Clearclaw love for some of these maps, because yeah, it's just crazy. I just feel like I'm, to pick up a Winsome game, you have to go to the Bohemian Grove, and if you don't pay for it, then the Bilderberg group or whatever just, erases you from the timeline. And, it is just not, this all came crashing down on me today, in the afterglow of this swap of like this amazing treasure I found. And yeah, it's just this entire world that I did not know about, and it seems like an impenetrable task to join it, But
it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned, or you used the metaphor of a yacht, because I feel like you were kind of baiting me with that comment because of the number of hours that I've spent talking about subcultures, and one of the subcultures I find very interesting is the boating community.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I know I shouldn't give information out that can triangulate the location of one of 3,000 copies of Age of Steam 2nd Edition, but that metaphor kind of comes from the fact that I live across the street from a yacht store and a block away from a harbor full of yachts.
Yeah, and so I know, but I'm just saying, like, I've put you to sleep several nights, going on and on about how I find it interesting, especially in a town so close to the water that has so many people that are boating and that kind of stuff. You talk to one person and they go, "Oh yeah, I have a boat," and then they tell you what all of that means to them, and so little of it actually has to do with having a boat. And then you go talk to another person and they say, "Oh yeah, I have a boat." And then they tell you all the stuff that means to them. And it's not about having a boat. And it's totally different than the other person who also told you about all the things that they don't do with their boat because they have a boat. And in a way, this almost seems like one of those things where you have to have this board game to kind of get into this subculture of doing this thing and collecting these things and hanging out with the people and being part of this little subculture within board gaming. But it's almost a hobby unto itself, and that's cool. Like this is not me denigrating it. This is me finding it fascinating. Like, let's be clear. Like I'm like I think that's rad. I mean, I have my own little rabbit holes that I fall down in, even with games, and I sort of have sub hobbies within it. So this is not a judgment.
No, this is all good fun judgment. But you're right. I mean, all of board gaming, even the stuff we're talking about now, but I mean, all board games, all the little subcultures of gamings are exactly the same. We're all getting something out of it that we can share, that we can talk about, that's a community. And what we want is the community. We don't necessarily want the thing. And that's the ticket, right?
There are tons of examples of stuff like this. I mean, for example, the fella that put out Love Letter originally, right? That was the Kanai Factory stuff, right? Love Letter and all those micro games, where to get those games, you essentially had, I mean, you sent your money in an envelope to his apartment, and he put it in an envelope and sent it to you.
Yeah.
And for a long time, that's the way it was. And there were war games that were put out that way for a long time, and even to a certain degree, it's almost like the subculture. I mean, it was really popular back in the 70s and the 80s, right? Of all the different wargaming magazines where
with the check boxes in the back.
Yeah, and like every single magazine had a game in it. And some of them were amazing, but the vast majority of them were just a thing to collect.
Yeah.
And the thing that I find fascinating about this, looking at it now, though, isn't that there's a subculture within the subculture. No, okay, that happens all the time. The thing that I find interesting is twofold. The first one is that this particular subculture is still going strong. I mean, this started a long time ago. I mean,
right.
For it to have started on a Yahoo group, that should tell you something. But two, and this is where I circle back around to the whole yacht metaphor thing, so many people that I talk to who are pretty freshly new into the world of boating, big or small, they go at it as if there's only one way to do these things. I bought this vessel. I'm talking to all these other people that own them. They're telling me all this stuff to do. Clearly, I have to change my oil every 30 minutes or else the boat's just going to sink. And sometimes they do these seemingly ridiculous things simply because their particular slice of subculture within subculture is telling them that there's only one way to do it. What I'm fascinated about here is that I'm curious to see what you're going to do now. Like I'm almost getting to stand here behind the one-way glass
and watch me slowly lose my mind
and watch you either go.
It's gonna be like Breaking Bad.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I fully know that even though I'm telling you this right now, tonight you're gonna go to bed, you're gonna wake up tomorrow, and you're gonna see Age of Steam, and you're gonna go, man, I really should go track down some maps. And I'm curious to see how far you go with this before you sort of find your little cubbyhole. To nestle in.
A lot of that's
this is going to be an adventure for both of us.
Yeah, well, it's gonna depend on how receptive everyone is to it, right?
Listen, I'm gonna fake it just to keep poking you,
just to see if you can Pavlov dog me.
Ding.
Amazon opens.
No, I fully expect to enjoy this game because you may not be able to tell this because of how much of a hipster I tend to sound like most often, but I was kind of an 18xx player for a while there.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I was. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it extensively because...
So if I get like 1860 or something, you already know how to play it?
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's been like 6 years since I've played any of them, so I... Other than remembering it sort of as train adjacent, there's not really much I could tell you. But yeah, I mean, 18xx was a pretty standard thing in one of the games groups that I was involved in heavily in college, and we did big whole game days that would be 18xx, and we'd play through the different years. They had, some of the people that had been around for a lot longer had mapped out a way through the different games that kind of chained it together to make it seem like a campaign, and it was awesome and fascinating. Because of that, I have not played Age of Steam. Because for a while there, at least the community I was in, there actually was a bit of snobbery kind of going on about, oh, well, yeah, they're trying to reduce 18xx to be something for the masses.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So and there was that bit of a elitism that said, we're not going to dip down to this game. But now I think
it's another throwback to like what we talked about with Scythe being 4X distilled down for the masses.
Yeah.
And Age of Steam is not for the masses, but compared to the 18xx community, it is for the masses, right?
Well, but some of it just has to do with where the masses are now. And I don't want to start a whole thing because this could be my monologue for the night, and I'm not there.
We haven't had one of those yet, John.
No, I know. It's coming, don't you worry. But
we have fans. They're going to be upset if you don't monologue for a little bit. Preach it, brother. Preach it.
But like, so the 18xx games, and there's a good chance I'm wrong, but the 18xx games are kind of built on that on the very American gaming model of let's make a game about business and commodities trading and stocks and bonds, and it's very Sid Saxon does trains,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Age of Steam, from what I have gathered, it's very Euro. And, the Euro brand of games, I mean, back when the 18xx was kind of at its height, again, at least in the group I was playing with, Euro games were just starting to break in. And most of the years you were having to import. And so some of it was just the whole, like, it was new, and it just wasn't where the community was at that time. Whereas now the community's drifted over and Euro play is kind of considered the meaty play. And so I feel like people have blurred the lines between those original divisions and now Age of Steam, 18xx, people sort of readily accept both of them. But again, that hasn't really been where I've been for the past couple of years. So I'm fully aware I'm more than likely wrong.
Well, I've watched it. Again, I don't know 18xx. I'm still a complete 18xx virgin. I am willing and looking for a suitor, but I have not dipped my toe in that water yet. So
that analogy makes me want to say it's 18xxx.
I'll be the title of the episode, 18xxx. Nailed it. All right. But no, I've watched this from kind of I have people in my galactic neighborhood, so to speak, not necessarily my immediate solar system. This is just going to be this is just the analogy.
I have
episode.
no clue what we're talking about anymore.
I do. But no, I don't know anyone directly that I game with that plays 18xx. But I know enough people that have played XXX with other groups, neighboring groups. And I've kind of watched them just get swallowed by 18xx. Like they try it once, they lose badly, and they're a little baffled, and it's always the types that, and this is what scares me a little bit. It's people like me. They're all people like me who, when they hit the really hard thing, they kind of get mad and hit it and just keep doing it until they figure it out. They just keep banging their head against the wall until it gets through. And, they're all people of kind of that attitude. And, I have kind of watched them from afar drop all of their other gaming for 18xx. So I'm a little bit, I'm a little tempted by it, that little, chase that dragon a little bit, because it's intriguing me to see like that. It must be just incredible the way it just grabs people, it just won't let go. Like they just can't get enough 18xx. So, as far as you watching me with this Age of Steam thing, as much as I'm laughing at it, part of the reason that it's like that is because those early days were so punk rock, right? I think it's super cool when someone is selling games in baggies out of their living room, and the only way to get them is to, send a self-addressed stamped envelope. I mean, that's super charming, right? That's cool. I kind of feel like if the origins of this thing are punk rock, then my journey is going to be punk rock, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm not terribly worried about it as far as that goes. However, what one weird thing that is going to give me a little bit of pause is when I get into a system like this, I tend to buy the entire system before I learn it because it drives me crazy to know I'm missing something, or that something's that a vital piece of this puzzle is going to disappear on me. It's been like that for like Command and Colors Ancients, Combat Commander, these systems that I've played one or two games, said this is such a universe unto itself that I could in the coming apocalypse save nothing but these 5 boxes and play this for the rest of my remaining days in my Fallout shelter, because the worlds in those boxes are so big, right? So when I discovered Combat Commander, I bought all like 9 sets for that game so that it would be complete. When I finally scored a copy of Command and Colors Ancients, I then immediately moved all of those expansions straight up to the top of my wish list and then just slowly plugged them off one at a time until I had them all. And it's funny because what I usually do is I know that is the case, which is why I didn't buy Command and Colors when it came out. I waited and waited and waited because I knew if I bought the first one, I was going to be out $400, right? Because I wasn't going to stop. And with that game, it wasn't until I ended up scoring one in a trade, very similar to this Age of Steam thing, I finally scored a copy of Command and Colors Ancients, and then, well, now I got it. Got to hoover up the rest. This Age of Steam thing, that is just not even slightly feasible. So in a lot of ways, I'm as interested as you are to see how I'm going to respond to this, particularly when the more I learn about it, the more that I read about it, the more that I hear about it, the more that the elephants over at Heavy Cardboard are streaming their live plays of these crazy maps from Age of Steam. How am I going to react to that? Like, is that going to just tear me apart? Like, I want that experience so bad that I'm just going to sell my entire game collection to fund a copy of one of those things. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think so, but it's going to certainly be interesting to see, what kind of mind trip it puts me on. Trying to cope with the fact that there are literally hundreds of maps, and most of them haven't seen the light of day in 15 years, right? So it'll be super, super painful and interesting, but mostly painful, I think.
Well, so I mean, are you in general a quote unquote completionist? I'm not one for labels, but do you not enjoy your games if you feel that they're in some way
missing something?
Yeah,
it drives me absolutely bonkers.
Really?
I can't stand, even when I know it's bad. When someone's like, this expansion just breaks the game. Like it was a waste of money, and all it takes is like 3 people going, I don't know what I agree with that. Then I'm like, well, the only way to know is if I buy it and try it myself. I don't trust no one but me.
Well, so how do you draw a line? Like in a system that's so big that you can't ever complete, how do you corral that such that you can enjoy your games? Or do you just literally sit there miserable, surrounded by sad games that don't get played?
No, I literally don't go into those systems. Like I don't go into lifestyle systems for that reason.
I find that kind of sad. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah?
I pity you a little bit for that.
No, you should. You should.
I'm saying that as a rehabilitated sufferer. And
a rehabilitated completionist?
Yeah. And for me, it came down to sort of realizing that publishers, and not even one publisher, but like the constellation of people that make money selling items have realized that they can essentially print their own money by attaching it to IP that we're invested in as collectors.
Right.
And I don't remember what game it was where it happened, but I finally just drew a line in the sand, and I said, here's where it is. I will not go beyond this point. I will have everything up to this point But after this point, it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned.
Mm.
And since then, I've been able to do that pretty easily with a lot of games. I mean, I'm not a huge X-Wing player, but I have a whole bunch of ships. But at the same time, I drew a line in the sand when they started coming out with a lot of the crazy EU stuff, and I wanted some of it. But like I said, I knew it was a trap, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I wanted to buy other games, and I didn't want to. Which, I mean, come on, you got to give me credit for that one. But anyway, oh, I need a laugh track. Anyway, but,
you just add it in post.
Oh, I have to cut so much out of this one. But I had to draw a line in the sand, and for me, what I essentially said was, I'm only going to collect Rebel and Imperial. The scum and villainy stuff doesn't exist to me, and I know there's a lot of people out there going, that's incredibly sad, there's a bunch of great stuff in there. I'm not saying there's not great stuff. I'm saying that's where I drew the line. And then I also sort of drew the line at a certain sort of area in the EU that I had a familiarity with, and just said, okay, like here's where it is. If a ship comes up that's inside this zone, I'll get it.
Right.
If it's outside that zone, it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. For me, that can work because I don't play competitively.
Right.
I mean, I don't really play at all. I mean, honestly, I'm just collecting a toy box at this point. But that was a way that I could enjoy my investment in it and enjoy the games I have played with it without feeling like I'm missing out. And I've had to do that with several other games. What's more is that, when stuff changes hands, but, from publisher to publisher, like a lot of long-standing series have, I mean, that's an easy way to sort of cut the cord and say it only exists up to this point. I don't know. I'm not going to get on a whole big, it's your collection, own your collection, play your games, have fun with the stuff you have kind of rant, right? Because it's not super applicable and it's not even really that much on point. But at the same time, it's, I don't know. This is kind of a wiggly one because, oh man, like I said, completionism as a key component to enjoying your game as a game and not your game as part of a collection, right? Because there is kind of two different things there.
Yeah.
But the idea that it has to be complete to enjoy it as a game, that really becomes a tough one at some point, because a game can be out of print for a long time and then all of a sudden someone comes up and reprints it and just starts adding stuff.
Yeah.
With the trends that we've seen of things sort of dying, going into legend and...
In compressed cycles too. I mean, that's the other thing. The things die and go into legend and turn around and come back so much faster than they used to.
Yeah, I mean, like I thank goodness that I broke myself of that need to have a complete set when I did, because I would honestly be scared to death of buying into any system whatsoever, even if it was relatively small, or if it was already done and had been put away, on the fear that one day it was going to grow again. And by making a purchase 5 years ago, I chained myself to something, 5 years hence. Like honestly, like I would be scared in that way. So I'm kind of glad that that's not an issue I deal with anymore. But at the same time, I fully understand that it exists.
It's weird how it starts. I am indeed wiser now than I was, as far as, well, this
says the guy who's thinking about joining an email list for $400 games.
Hey, you know what? We don't look into the dark mirror, John. I'm talking about your problems, not mine. No, this is a whole nother podcast. It really is. And it may be interesting or maybe not interesting, so maybe it's not a podcast. But I've had experiences kind of exploring the hobby. And for me, a big one was when we play tested some stuff for WizKids at one point. Not WizKids now, but WizKids long, long ago when Jordan Weissman was still running the show. I was on a playtest team, and we were doing a lot of playtesting for MechWarrior Dark Age at the time, and then MechWarrior Age of Destruction. And that process, it was super fun, but kind of a side effect of that whole run was I sort of got to peek behind the curtain. It was kind of like when you are young and you realize your parents are fallible human beings and not the authority and right about everything. And, that experience with WizKids made me realize, and this is nothing against WizKids, that they were doing anything wrong. The people that were designing these things were not infallible. They weren't smarter than me. And that's the thing, is when authors, again, the parallel to books is always there, or the parallels to film or parallels to music, because this is just kind of a hobby that you kind of latch on to IPs and latch on to authors and latch on to this and that. And you just kind of assume, you become fans of those people because they're doing things that you think you can't. That's why you follow them. I have a favorite artist because that artist can paint things in ways that I can't even comprehend, and I find that fascinating, and I just adore it. We kind of do that same thing with games. And when I went through that process of playtesting with WizKids, man, I realized how often they were just throwing poop against the wall and seeing what stuck. And that experience...
Which, for the record, is how people paint and also how authors write.
Right. It's how people do podcasts.
Yeah.
So I get that now. That was wisdom, so, and that experience kind of helped me with the completionism thing a little bit. Quite frankly, as we talked about before on one of the early podcasts, the industry has gotten so big and things are coming out so fast now that it is just a blur. Back in the old days when things were a little more measured and calm, I kind of got into the habit of buying all the expansions for something blind because there's a half-life to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you sell, and this is where I, pull numbers out of the air, someone's air, but if you sell 50,000 copies of a game, the expansion's only going to sell half that. And then the second expansion is going to sell half as much as the first expansion. And the third expansion sells half as much as the second expansion. Because to buy 3 or 4 expansions in, you got to be super fan. So really early on, I picked up on the fact that if a game had 4 expansions, I needed to buy them as quick as possible. And I needed to actually start at expansion 4 and work back to the front just because of rarity. Just because of raw numbers. So part of that drive comes from that early on when I was figuring all this out, like you do when you get into the hobby. So that kind of made me have that completionism bug. Another aspect of it is that a lot of times expansions are patch kits for games, and sometimes they're more effective than others. But there is not an insignificant number of games where an expansion comes out and fixes a problem pretty readily. Anecdotally, it probably happens less often than it seems because when it works, everybody goes, "Oh, hey, of course, that's what you need. This expansion is a must. It fixes this thing." And raw number-wise, that probably is less common than extraneous expansion that's just stuff and does nothing or makes things worse. But you remember the positives, right? That's what people do. They remember the super positives and the super negatives, and all the stuff in between that balances out. We completely forget like it never happened.
Yeah,
I'm sure that has a psychological name, but it's a thing. When these games have these patch kits, again, I get a game, I like it, and there's 3 expansions. Just buy them all in case one of them has the patch in it that you're going to need later, and you want to have access to the patch. Again, maybe that's crazy, but that's where the mindset is. And really, in the early days of this, it was kind of slow and methodical enough that was doable. You could do that without going bankrupt. But right now, as we are surfing this cascade of games that is just dumping over the top of my yacht, that, you just can't keep up. And like you said, there's a psychological aspect of this from the people selling the games. They want the monkeys to push the button over and over and over and over and over. And so there are games that are clearly designed in whole, and then at release they parcel the game out into 3 parts when it was all designed at once. I've kind of gotten to the point when that stuff happens, that kind of ticks me off a little bit. And those are games that I tend to not follow or get into.
Yeah.
Because while I certainly understand it from a business point of view, it feels a little manipulative to me. And it feels a little slimy to release half of a game and then parcel out the full game over the course of 4 expansions. That's dicey, and that feels a little slimy.
It is. I will say there are some games that had they put everything into the game at point zero, the game would have been too expensive to be competitive at retail.
Right.
I get that. However, I know that there are probably more examples where they do it simply because they, are trying to milk it.
Right. But, I mean, we're kind of in the weeds now. But
yeah, I was about to say, I mean, this certainly isn't the case when you're talking about getting, maps for Age of Steam, though.
No, it's not. But where this does to get us kind of back on course to where this was all leading.
Oh, you should set back on track.
What? I don't get it. No, the bigger picture wise is what this is doing right now in a lot of ways is really putting a spotlight on how this is a luxury hobby, and it is by any definition. And it's kind of interesting to see. What are you laughing at?
I had a very funny image in my head because you've been describing this game as your yacht, but I also just know it's a cardboard box. So I have this visual image of you sitting in a cardboard box in the water, look at my yacht, everybody. Right? Is it just a luxury item? And everyone's walking by going, just don't look at the crazy man.
One, the opening scene of Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm just proudly grabbing the flagpole and sinking up to my knees.
But the thing about it is it does put a bit of a fine point on how curious it is that we have a luxury cardboard.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, is the Kickstarter thing. You cannot Kickstarter games anymore that cost less than $150. At least not anything that's like heavy strategy. Like occasionally a cool little punk rock thing will come up there for $20, and it's awesome when that happens. But more often than not, every single game that comes out, I mean, they put the $60 thing there. Absolutely, you can buy this copy of Blood Rage for $60. Enjoy your 1/3 of the game. And they keep doing it because people keep buying it, and that's fine. Again, I am not one to say what anyone does with their money, but for me personally, it makes me feel like that I'm not in Kansas anymore, right? Like this is a thing that I started gaming because it was cheap. And again, it is the stereotype, cheap gamer, right? But when I was 22 years old, I went golfing 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. That's what I did. I golfed all the time. It was awesome. I loved golf. And then I had a wife, and then I had kids, and then I was like, there is no possible way I can golf 4 times a week anymore. It cost a fortune. And I got into gaming because I could still get that 3 hours out of the house, hang with friends, do all the stuff we did when we golfed, and I would only be out $50 once a month, right? And again, nothing wrong with it, but just where I kind of lift my head up from my shoelaces for a minute and look around, and I'm like, where am I? That the buy-in for this thing is now becoming $300-400 a month if you want to be with the cool kids. And again, you don't have to be with the cool kids, and there's nothing wrong with the cool kids. It's just kind of shocking to look up and see where things are at.
Well, I think there's been another subculture that's arisen, and that is the culture that sort of says this is what board games are, and then point to a box that's the size of a Pinto and full of plastic, and but it's like I said, it's no different than any other subculture. You have the people that can put you to sleep talking about this beer versus that beer, and then they'll fight amongst themselves about legitimacy of one particular view of taste versus another particular view of taste. But they're essentially talking about the same thing. But the thing is, both of them have different hobbies that just happen to come in bottles.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the boat. People fight about all sorts of stuff, but they're there for a different reason. And I think that board gaming is very similar, where, sure, we all buy our games at roughly the same place, and our social time looks very similar. However, the thing that we're sort of pushing our sort of personal value currency across the table on could be very, very different. I mean, there are some people who only like to research and collect games, and they don't really care to play them. There are some people that, I mean, all they want to do is have a big get together and basically watch people play games that they researched and bought for those events. I mean, I know people who do that.
Well, that's the Time Stories crowd, right? We talked about, like, I don't understand why this game is so huge, but it's huge because there are enough people that are like that want to just give that experience to groups of people, and they can play Time Stories 84 times because what they're getting out of it is not what Time Stories is giving them. It's that interaction with those people, that they're handing them an adventure. It's something like, let me show you this world, you know, and those are the people that are buying that, you know, because... So yeah, I agree 100%.
Well, I sometimes am shocked by it as well when I forget about it, right? And I don't expect it in a conversation, and then there's that pivot, and I realize I'm talking to someone who has a totally different hobby with me, but we've been talking 3 hours about our own hobbies, only to realize that we were talking about something different.
Yeah.
And you know, a while back, I even shared this, how there are times where I have to catch myself because I'm the person excitedly saying, this is the thing you need to do. This is where you need to be putting your money. But I'm doing that, again, thinking I'm talking to someone who's there for the same reason I am, simply because they use the word board game. Yeah. And that's where you kind of have to open up your understanding of the umbrella hobby and then all little pathways down deeper into these little subcultures, but understand that, yeah, like there are lines between them. I mean, like, sure, you know, there's some pretty classic rivalries, you know, between Euro people and war gamers, and you know, now you know, the people that are doing CCGs are starting to become very loud and humorous about that kind of stuff too. And but the thing is, like, most of the people I know, they may be pretty hot and heavy into one or two of those subcultures. However, they sort of float between several of them, and I think that's sometimes what gets us into trouble, right? Is because we make assumptions because we're all floating a little bit.
Yeah. You've inspired me a little bit, John. I think, you know, we're in a new age of gaming right now. All new ages of gaming, they have a marker that isn't clear in the time, but 25 years from now when you look back, there was the pivotal thing. Mm-hmm. And the pivotal thing was when Ogre, a game that formerly shipped in a Ziploc baggie, the size of a sandwich that was sitting under your thermos for 6 hours.
Yeah.
When that game came back a couple years ago in a box that weighed 47 pounds, 3 feet across and 2 feet wide, mm-hmm. and assembled itself into these giant 6-inch pieces that you slid around the board with kind of, I can only presume, like the big
it was like shuffleboard with tanks.
Yeah. When that came out, that was when this happened. So I think to memorialize this, I'm gonna go get a copy, the new edition of Ogre, and I'm just gonna bury it about halfway into the sand. And I will call this "You Damn Dirty Apes."
Oh, they finally did it. Maniacs.
Oh man.